Welcome to the Fantasy Formula One podcast, where we use fake money to buy real Formula One teams to win imaginary points.
Yeah.
I'm back. I'm back. I didn't goof it up. I'm Paul. That is Ben,
Hey.
and we are discussing things that happened in the wake. We were discussing the Fantasy Formula One world in the wake of the Netherlands.
Yes.
And the big thing is that this is the first Netherlands race where Max Verstappen did not win.
And you're right. He's been
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
And I would like to give a shout out to F1.com and their F1 coverage, because a lot of the stats I get and that little bit of knowledge came from the talking heads there.
Oh, sure.
Which is awesome. But yeah, so he did not win. And so my team, I went in and we used Limitless on one of my teams, made sure Max Verstappen had the 2X, and that ended up losing me points because the man to beat this week was Lando Norris.
Yeah.
Lando Norris got a ton of points, and I missed out on being in the top 500.
I don't know. Like your point totals across your teams 1, 2, and 3 there, that's not too shabby. Can you go back real quick for completed races?
Yeah.
Your team 1 got 247, team 2 175, and team 3 386. I mean,
I used a Limitless on the 386.
Still, that's a good 3-point total there.
Especially if you look to the week before when it was 122, 128, 150.
Yeah.
Belgium was just a rough week for me.
Sure.
It just was.
Well, this is, we've been preaching for a couple of weeks there that, as long as you've either got some Mercedes or McLaren on your team, you're going to do relatively well. That is true-ish. However, the difference between you and I here is pretty significant, because my point totals were 174, 159, and 165. I had some McLaren on each team, but I went much more Mercedes heavy.
Okay.
And and so between Hamilton and Russell getting 7th and 8th, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah, that damned me. Like, again, I don't hate the numbers I got, but this was definitely a significantly more orange week for you.
It really was, and that's a good thing to kind of kick off with this. We've been back and forth about Mercedes versus Ferrari, Mercedes, Ferrari, who's coming, who's going. They really do displace each other. As soon as Ferrari has a great week, they displace Mercedes.
Yeah.
As soon as Mercedes has a great week, they displace Ferrari. McLaren and Max Verstappen are always going to be in the top 6.
Right.
And Sergio Perez did pretty well this week too.
He did. I don't remember where he started.
Yeah.
But again, to come in P6, especially with the fact that the Red Bull car is no longer the dominant car. I think Christian Horner himself came out and said McLaren is in a different league this week.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
So so that technical advantage is officially gone. I think everything that McLaren has done up to this point has not been a fluke. They have not just been, they have been getting incrementally better to then ascend to this point of dominance. It wasn't just that Lando won by 22 seconds because 5 other cars crashed into each other with 2 laps to go.
Yeah. Completely agree.
Nobody DNF'd. So you had 20 cars cross the finish line, and with that, you still have Lando Norris winning by a margin of 22 seconds. The car is good.
Absolutely.
This is exactly what you were talking about last week. We had a shorter episode last week because we said we have no real new insights.
Yeah.
Other than these are some good teams. It'll all come down to what happens on Sunday when these cars unleash and unveil their upgrades.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out the McLaren upgrades are amazing.
Wonderful.
I would even say, prior to the FP3 crash by Logan Sargent, the Williams and the disqualification by Albon from qualifying,
which
their cars are better. They started in 19 and 20, and they moved up several spots relative to their starting position.
For sure.
So the upgrades absolutely matter. I think coming away from this, we're looking at McLaren potentially being the new Red Bull of the last couple of years. And I think what's really exciting is watching the chase unfold. I'm stepping out of the fantasy realm for just a second here. Max Verstappen still has a 70-point lead on the season overall. I think it's going to be an awfully close race. I think he can hang on to it just because he's an incredible driver. But these McLaren cars, man, they're really exciting here to have that dominant of a performance. And then I think secondarily, this is something we've been missing from Sergio Perez, is Oscar Piastri. He's had that taste of victory this season. He's been on the podium a couple of times, and now after these upgrades, the way he's talking, he's going, I mean, he got P4. You're in between Ferrari and you still beat all of Mercedes. You've only got Leclerc, Verstappen, and your teammate Lando Norris ahead of you, and you come away saying, this was a disappointing week.
That's a good point.
If you're talking like that, your drive is that I want to be a winner long term. I want to taste that again, and I have the capability to do it. Not just oh, I won once. This was the highlight of my career that will last maybe 5 more years, and I'll always talk about this moment. No, it's
right.
It's I belong here and better. So if P4 is not enough to make you happy, you got something special going on with Oscar Piastri.
Completely agree. Especially, oh gosh, no, I won't even say especially with, because you said it all already. That is absolutely true. And he beat Sergio Perez. So talking about how the Papaya cars are the team to beat right now, you have both. I want to say, so with McLaren P1 and P4, Sergio Perez got P6, and that was a strong show for him.
Yeah.
So with the McLaren trying to take over and trying to win the Constructors' Championship still, is it 2v1, basically? Is it 2 McLaren cars versus Max Verstappen as far as those points? Because as soon as both McLarens are always in the top 5, Max Verstappen's always in the top 3, and Sergio Perez maybe will be in the top 10, then do you think that those points over the next 10, 11 races will make it so that McLaren can win the championship? And there's a fantasy question to follow up for this, but what do you think?
How many races do we have
we
left?
Have, I want to count, I think we should have 24 in the season.
Okay.
And to go back one more to here, races, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 down.
Oh my gosh.
So we have 9 races left. 15 to 24. Yeah, we have 9 races.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. And especially if McLaren, because you said there's 70 points between them in the championship?
Correct.
Okay.
I think that might be the individual. Let's look at
okay, yeah, let's look
totals.
At
and again, to clarify, we're not looking at fantasy points right now. We're looking at actual F1 points.
Yeah.
But
F1 dot.
I think in any other context, a 70-point lead is very comfortable.
Yeah.
But again, given the consistent high performance of one McLaren or the other, I think that can get knocked down pretty quick.
So I'm on F1.com, and I know we're not going to show you the screens just because that's
not as visually interesting.
It's not visually interesting.
So Max Verstappen has 295.
Where was that right there?
Yeah.
Oh.
And then Lando Norris is in a healthy second with 225.
Okay, let's talk about that right there.
Sure.
So Max Verstappen, so that's 70, 80, 90. Yeah, it's 70 points.
70 points different.
Which means over 9 races, if Lando Norris can get 70, whatever 70 divided by 9 is, math. I know. I have some friends who are teachers and educators, and I'm sorry that I have to use that because public math. That's 7.8 points.
Yeah,
call it 8 points. That's 8 points a race. So
he'd have to beat him by a margin of 8 points per race.
8 points per race, or have there be one race where Max DNFs or finishes outside of the top 10.
Sure,
and have McLaren win. That's 30 points right there.
Yeah, but again, averaging it, he's not going to do that every week.
He's not going to do that.
So again, I think if you have to win by an average of 8 points every week, I would say that's a tall order, but it was a 22 second gap between them. Like if Lando had won this by like 2.3 seconds, I would say, okay, it's great that he won, and he'll get closer, but there's no way he's going to catch him.
And to anybody who's sitting here saying that we're just Max Verstappen haters or that we don't understand how Formula One works, we understand. I get it. What we're saying is this sort of 20-second gap didn't occur the last 2 or 3 years.
Right.
And all the cars are catching up. I understand. And maybe Max just had a bad race. The car wasn't tuned in just right. Maybe McLaren had brought some extra game. I don't know. But the fact that this 20-second gap existed and all the coverage, all the news, all the everything isn't, oh my gosh, Max Verstappen had a really
bad
car, had a bad race. They did something else, caught fire, a bird hit it or whatever. No, he just got outpaced by the McLaren. And when you look at them in the post race, if you look at them in the winner's circle before they go shaking champagne at each other, he's not sitting here scratching his head going, oh my gosh, I can't believe. Because when Max Verstappen doesn't do well because there's something wrong with the car, he's very vocal. As soon as there's something off, he is very vocal about it. He wasn't vocal. He was like, no, we got beat.
Yep.
It's on the stuff I watched. So,
yeah, like, so to be able to accept things that readily when the win was so dominant, that speaks volumes.
It does.
Absolutely it does.
So to the fantasy side of it, to me, that means you need to definitely have McLaren as your constructor, which we all know already.
Yep.
If you're new to this, which I know you're not you, but the people watching out there in TV land, you need to have McLaren on your team.
Yep.
You need to probably have Lando Norris. I either had Lando Norris as my head driver or I had Oscar Piastri, which Oscar Piastri came in fourth. That's strong, not as dominant as Lando. But I don't know. But I would say that from a tactic standpoint, it's obvious, like McLaren, I know this is another moment. McLaren is going after Max Verstappen. And I say that because there has been times, at least, my fear, especially from a fantasy standpoint, is that once you get in the latter half of the season, once it's all established, once you know who's going to win, then a lot of teams at some point, they all do it, stop investing in this year's car and start looking into next year's car.
Yep.
Because the budget, again, need to learn a lot more about it. It's not, here's your $500 or $500 million, whatever, put it into this car, and then here's another pot of $500 million you can put into next year's. The budget is spread out over years.
Yep.
So whatever you don't put into this year, you can put into next year.
And I think what you just did was, without mentioning him by name, you just perfectly described Aston Martin.
Yeah.
I think they started this year with a real hope to hang with the top cars, and I think that hope has faded, as pretty substantially. And there was even an article from Alonso's perspective in terms of like, hey, we thought we could be one of those top 4 constructors, but there are 4 very distinct top performers, and they are in another world right now. For us to have worked as hard as we have to only get 1 point cumulatively as a constructor at the Netherlands speaks to the fact that we have a lot of work to do, and the fact that we have teams like Alpine occasionally still eking by Aston Martin. It means they are at a point where it's time to start looking towards 2025 and what work can be done there. And if there's any way we can convince Lawrence Stroll to not hire his son anymore, that's not a quote from the article, but you should.
And in case anybody's thinking we were hating on Lance Stroll, I am still working on editing. I haven't put too much work into it. Me racing the sim race.
Oh, okay.
Right. I know it didn't make it into the episode.
You're talking about the Henry Ford?
Yeah, so I went to the Henry Ford Museum, and
sorry, I didn't mean to dox you. We're in Detroit.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, we're in Detroit, everybody. But no, so I went to the Henry Ford Museum, and they have like the sort of motion race simulators, the F1 race simulators, like you see Max Verstappen and everybody racing. And I walked in there pretty arrogant, thinking I know how to work shifters, of course. And I watched and got the induction. I'm like, here we go. Raced 2 races. First one, I had a hard time getting out of pits. And it was horrible. Huge learning curve. Did well the second race. But for anybody who thinks that we're sitting here dogging on him, no, I'm going to post a video of me very poorly driving one of these cars and having a blast doing it.
No, that's great. We had the idea to do that when we did some go-karting as well, but it was a rainy day and it was super loud, and it's not going to make for a fun video.
No, so we're not going to do that. But we're not saying that we are superior. We're saying that, But hopefully Aston Martin makes great changes for 2025. I should not take his son's place. You do not want me as your F1 driver.
Oh, with Lawrence Stroll.
With Lawrence Stroll. Sorry, yeah. So
you don't fantasize about being Lance Stroll's son.
I do not fantasize about being Lance Stroll's son.
I think we've got our episode title.
But Lawrence Stroll, he should reevaluate if Lance Stroll is the best driver for his team. I am not one of those people who he should consider to fill the spot based on my sim race.
Oh, I got you. Okay, fair. No, that's some healthy self-deprecation. That's good. Speaking of potential team changes, though,
yes.
Little transition.
Oh, I'll be down with that.
Yeah. Williams. So Logan Sargent, our countryman, crashes during free practice 3.
Yeah.
However, despite not being able to to do the qualifying because the damage was too severe. He goes from P20 to P16. I don't think that's terrible. However, we know he's losing the seat to Carlos Sainz next year. Makes all the sense in the world, but there is still a lot of talk about changes being made mid-season.
Yeah.
And a lot of discussion and actually like vocal support from Toto Wolff of all people for Mick Schumacher having a chance again, saying he's raced in all these other formats. We haven't seen what he can really do.
Dude.
Why not give him the spot? Why not give him the spot for the remainder of the season? Now, he is currently Mercedes' reserve driver.
Okay.
And so I have a couple questions about that.
Yeah.
A, would you support that? And B, what do you think based on his previous performance with Haas? Because I think he was on the team with Haas until 2022.
Mick Schumacher?
Yes.
Yeah.
I
think so, yeah.
Things went out with a bang multiple times. Do you think he would come in at the same price point as Logan Sargent currently is, or would he start higher?
I do not think he would start higher. I think they would probably, I think Fantasy F1 should start him off at like 4.5 million.
Okay.
Which is the low end. Maybe 5. And the reason is first off, because as soon as you bring him in any higher than 5, no one's going to put him on your team.
That's a good point. Obviously, the Fantasy F1 administrators are going to want people to engage with a new driver if possible.
So you would have to, like with me, as soon as you bring him in at 4.5 million, well, then he's an unknown. He could do great things. We don't know.
And worst case scenario, he still clears up a lot of budgetary space for you to stack the top end of your team.
And he's driving a Williams that has been. So when Behrman, right?
Yeah.
Ollie Behrman came in and he raced that one race with Ferrari. He came in at $7 million ish. I think that, or $13 million. I have to go back and look at I don't have the numbers.
Just by virtue of the fact that he's driving a Ferrari.
He's driving a Ferrari.
Yeah.
So he should do pretty good because he's in a top contender car. If they had put him at 4.5 million, everybody would have gotten it.
Of course.
Right. But as soon as you priced him at however he was, like 7 or 13 or however it went, it made it so you had to move around your teams to get him in.
And it's much more of a toss-up.
Exactly. As soon as Williams, first off, Williams would only get rid of Sargent and bring in Schumacher or anybody if they're like, you literally can't do worse than Sargent's been doing. And they had this brand new car full of upgrades that Sargent didn't even get to the race. I hear they were able to rebuild his car.
Yeah, I mean he raced.
And it was good. And they had most, if not all, of the upgrades on it. From a fantasy perspective, if you bring in Schumacher or anybody, they should price him low because otherwise it's going to be inconsequential. You know, what you want to do is you want to have it as soon as anybody does have Sargent. You only have Sargent or Zhou Guanyu or Bottas on your team if you put your money elsewhere, and those are the guys that you have to have. Yeah. And so as soon as you're going to do that, that's what you want Schumacher to be. As soon as you bring in Schumacher and you have him in a Williams priced at 9 or 10 million, first off, you wouldn't have him over Pierre Gasly.
Yeah.
So where's Pierre Gasly? Let me go back to my team.
Yeah. And you make a really good point. You know, when you have a guy who hasn't been in F1 for a couple of years, I mean, in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
He's still been on the scene, but he's largely, because it's a new constructor, he is largely an unknown quantity. For that unknown quantity to be a selling point, the price has to be awfully low, and the person he's replacing has to be an established liability.
Exactly.
So I think you have a lot of those things, but again, so I think you're absolutely right. That low price point has to be an element for him to be. And
I misspoke. I said Pierre Gasly. I meant Alex Albon.
Yeah.
So Alex Albon, he has 11 points, 49% selection rate, and he's only at 8.6 million.
Yeah.
So if you bring in Mick Schumacher, now granted, as soon as for some reason, you know, Oscar Piastri starts driving for Williams, or next year when Carlos Sainz, right, is driving for Williams, he's going to come in at a higher price point. I generally
higher, but not nearly where
he's at right now because he's not in Ferrari.
Got it.
So yeah, so hopefully if they bring in Mick Schumacher, and
I'm sorry, you said Carlos Sainz, not Oscar Piastri. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. I was pontificating a little bit. Logan Sargent right now is at 4.8. If for the next rate, $4.8 million.
Yep.
If right now they were to bring in Mick Schumacher, how high can his price be and have me change around my team to get him on my team?
Sure.
I mean, 5.5. I think that would work.
But tops though. I hear what you're saying, because you still need that that low price driver. And again, given that he is not proven,
I'd take Jogan Yu, who has 26 points.
Yeah.
Right. I would take, So I take Alex Albon, Jogan Yu, Valtteri Bottas. All of those are between the $6 and the $10 million.
Sure.
I would take them because as soon as you bring in Mick Schumacher and he's anything more than that, he might just not. He might do horribly, or he might do great. You need to be able to have that.
And that's exactly it. He could get brought in next week and for the remainder of the season, and during those remaining races, if things go poorly enough, he could make us miss Logan Sargent. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, the risk associated with that necessitates a low price point.
Especially because they'll jump prices, but usually if you do have a good race, they raise your price $0.5 million.
Sure.
Wonderful breakout performances, it'll go up $1 million.
Okay.
So as soon as he comes in at $7 million and you're like, man, I don't know. As soon as he finishes in the top 10, he's only going to, now he'll be $8 million next week and you can still get him reasonably cheap.
Gotcha.
As soon as he comes in at $8 million and he gets a DNF his first race, it'll drop to $7 million. And now you've lost $1 million of your overhead.
Okay. No, that makes sense.
For price point, you got to be careful. He starts out at 4.5 or 5. Yeah, he won't go down too much and he might be worth it.
Sure.
Especially because, he's a fine driver, but yeah, and I forget all of his history, and then that's okay for right now at least. If he comes in or whoever they go to replace Logan Sargent, and it's got to be, how about this? I wanted to see Logan Sargent do well and succeed and stay in F1.
Oh, sure. It hasn't happened.
It hasn't happened, and at some point, the politics are going to catch up with him.
Oh, of course.
It's you and I have been around government work long enough to know that eventually you become from prospect to suspect. And no matter what he does, it's not going to work. He's probably already beyond that point since he lost his ride for next year.
Yep.
But as soon as, maybe this year. But I would definitely buy into whoever came, as long as it's in the right price point.
Gotcha. Okay, no, that's great. And I know we're a little lighter on content this week, in between here, but I do have a couple theoretical questions.
Ooh, love it.
Say the season ended today.
Yes.
Season's over. We're walking into the 2025 season. And so Sainz is full on Williams now.
Yep.
Where would you anticipate, or where would you see his price point starting, given that it's Carlos Sainz but in Williams white?
I think I see his price point being around the same as. And
I'm sorry. Let me backtrack. How much does he cost right now with Ferrari?
So right now, Carlos Sainz is $22.9 million. I see him being in the Fernando Alonso.
Really?
How about this? I see it being that sort of thing where Fernando Alonso is a world champion.
Yeah.
All right. He's good. Granted, he hasn't won in a decade. Got it.
Yeah.
But I see it being that sort of thing where they balance his success with what he's driving. So will he be $22.9 million? Absolutely not.
No. I
think he will be over Alex Albon. Because Albon's staying with Williams, right?
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree there.
So
yes, Albon's with Williams, I think through 26 for sure.
Okay, and I have it all written down. I actually forgot. So if Albon right now at 8.6, he only has 11. If the season magically ended right now, I could see Alex Albon starting at like 7.5 or 8 for next year, just because. Fine,
sure,
but I see Carlos Sainz probably coming in at between 10 and 12 million. And the reason being is it's very, very possible he's still driving a Williams.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And you can, in the end, Williams isn't one of the top 4 constructors. And when there's only 10 constructors, he's not fantasy-wise going to be placing inside the top 8. Odds are right now, because who's going to be in the top 8 drivers? You have both McLaren, both Ferrari, both Mercedes, both Red Bull.
Yep. Those
are your top 8 constructors. Those are your top 4 constructors, ergo your top 8 drivers. So you have to price them accordingly. And as soon as you price Carlos Sainz as much as 15 or 16 or $18 million, there is zero return on that investment.
Yep. Okay.
Because he's driving a Williams.
Absolutely.
So I would say put him at 10 or 12. I would honestly, if Carlos Sainz comes in at 10 million, I would go ahead and put him on one of my teams, just because as soon as he does do great, then you want to be able to ride that increased value.
Sure.
As soon as Williams figures it out, then great, let's do it.
Yeah.
I don't know if Williams will, but for 10 million, it's worth it. For anything more than that, then you have to do kind of the wait and see, because the good teams always jump up by the good drivers always jump up by $5 and $10 million increments until they get to at some magical point. I don't know the algorithm. And I would hate to see it or that they drop it. I would hate to invest heavily into Carlos Sainz and Williams and have it perform like they are now.
Yeah. And
then you're losing your money.
I got
maybe risk it with one of your teams, but not for all of them. But that being said, as soon as Carlos Sainz comes in and he's $5, $6, $7 million,
all
absolutely,
day,
you get him on your team.
Yeah.
So that way you can kind of figure it out. But as soon as you double that price,
and at that point, again, strictly from a fantasy perspective, pray that he dumps out at Q1 every race, and then just because again, Sainz is a fighter, he'll fight his way up the grid.
Oh yeah.
So let him dump out at Q1, maybe at P15, and then maybe he breaks into real points. But that would be so that'd be a cool mix.
As soon as Carlos Sainz, you can get him for $10 million, and he qualifies in the back of the pack, but finishes P12.
Sure.
That's at least 6 to 8, because you get 1 point for passing, 1 point for each position advanced.
Yeah.
That's at least 8 points, maybe up to 16 or 20 points per race. That's wonderful, man.
Sure.
That I'd have him for $10, $12 million all day long.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But if he ends up just crashing out or putting it into the wall or getting disqualified for whatever, then
Sure. So, well, thank you for that.
No problem.
So back into the remainder of this season, Ferrari got 3rd and 5th.
Yeah.
This time around, Mercedes got 7th and 8th. I don't think I'm going to move off of Mercedes until I see at least one more week, so I have a solid data point for how have these upgrades affected everyone. Because again, like you said, when Max got 2nd and it was still a dominant performance, he didn't say there was something wrong with my car. And we know Lewis Hamilton has no problem saying that there's some BS going on with my team.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that article. Maybe it exists, but I haven't seen a vocal response from him yet. So I wonder if Mercedes has maybe lost a little bit of the technological momentum they had going for them, or what. So I'm gonna wait and see at least one more week whether I go back to run back to Ferrari, or stick with Mercedes, because my third team, my guinea pig team, I went full Ferrari, and that actually rewarded me pretty well this week. So let me backtrack here. So I'm going to wait till next week to make any official changes.
Agreed.
What are your thoughts, though, in terms of Mercedes versus Ferrari right now?
I think you're correct to wait one more week to see. And the reason being is that this track was a little different. If you look at the stats, P9 through the back of the pack was down by at least 1 lap.
Okay.
So the lap was very short. It was a 77-lap race. The track was pretty short.
Okay.
There's traditionally, what the talking heads were saying, a lot of overtaking going on. I didn't see that. But as soon as you have Max Verstappen finishing 22 seconds behind that, and then so from P1 to P2 was over 22 seconds. P2 to P3 was 25 seconds. No, I'm misreading that. Okay, cool. So from P1 to P2 is 22 seconds, then 3 seconds, then 2 seconds, then 5 seconds, then 7 seconds, then 5 seconds, and then everyone else is a lap down by that point. And to me, that makes me think that I've yet to see this many laps down, like in recent memory, but I think it's a big enough outlier that I'm not jumping away from Mercedes quite yet.
That's fair.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Does it give me cause to concern? Yeah, but the fact that Mercedes had an off week the same time that Max Verstappen had an off week, I don't know if they both had an off week or just maybe McLaren had a great week.
Yeah.
Am I going to change a little bit of my lineup? Yes, but I'm not going to divest of Mercedes. I might not have it be full Mercedes like I have it. I might go ahead and get rid of either Russell or Hamilton and try and get Oscar Piastri on.
Yeah.
Just to kind of get a little bit more of that McLaren love on there. But I'm not jumping back to Ferrari because they did have a great race. I just don't know if this is really representative of what Max Verstappen can do or
Sure.
what Mercedes can do.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And it's like we've said throughout the season, you need at least two data points for a trend. It's still not not healthy, but it gives you a line in a certain direction. So I want to see next week before I jump ship.
And the fact that we're talking about fantasy, not real world racing.
Yeah.
If you look at, for anybody else is like, no, Mercedes is horrible right now. Well, like, okay, so George Russell got 13 fantasy points last week, and Lewis Hamilton got 21. That's not, remarkable, especially considering Lando Norris got 56.
And
right?
And when you discuss their price points too, Mercedes is both drivers are fairly high dollar.
They are.
So to turn in that kind of points performance isn't amazing.
No, it's definitely not. But as soon as you sell them and then they get back on their power band, their price is going to go up and you're not going to be able to afford them again.
Correct.
So I don't think it's worth jumping ship on them, especially because Lewis Hamilton's value, and this is one thing that perplexes me about this game.
Yeah.
His value went up $0.3 million. His value is continuing to increase. All of their value is continuing to increase despite questionable performances. The only people who went down, Esteban Ocon, Daniel Ricciardo, Yuki Tsunoda, they all decreased. Alex Albon decreased. Both Kick Saubers decreased.
But that's a very interesting point. And I think what's interesting now is Lewis Hamilton is more expensive than Oscar Piastri. But if you take Lewis Hamilton, George Russell, and Oscar Piastri, especially in the caliber of the McLaren he's driving right now, I'm taking Piastri all day over the other two.
Yeah,
I think I could go 6-1, half a dozen in the other, still with Mercedes right now as to which driver I think has been more dominant throughout the season. And that's cool, but it's also frustrating. If you're going to take an element of Mercedes, it's kind of a crapshoot as to which one's going to be hot that week.
And then that it really comes down to that for how well your fantasy team does.
Absolutely.
Because right now, if you were to say, hey, I'm going all in on Ferrari, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
On Mercedes, I think that's a great idea.
And again, Russell has been the new hotness a few times. Yeah. But whenever I've picked him, something has gone catastrophically wrong. Again, not a ding on his caliber as a driver, but the consistency is not there for having a high-priced element of that team on your fantasy team.
Yeah.
With McLaren, generally it's Lando Norris is going to be relatively dominant, and Oscar Piastri is not going to suck.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Which is cool.
Yeah.
I can count on those things. And again, lately, Piastri being pissed off with P4, man, that's music to my ears.
Oh, absolutely.
I want him on that team. So
absolutely.
So if I make any adjustments, I'm probably going to sacrifice Hamilton for Piastri to save $0.3 million and to I think reasonably have a chance at better points.
I completely agree.
Cool.
Completely agree. And in that sense, last week, for anybody who tuned in last week, I made the big push of changing all of my rank and file drivers to both Haas. Thank you.
Yeah.
Both Haas and both V-Carb, except for my Mercedes team,
which you couldn't afford.
I couldn't afford to do.
Yep.
However, both of these guys, so that was a little outlier because I used my for my team 3, I went ahead and used the Limitless for that, right?
Okay, yeah.
So those that seemed to work pretty well, both Haas and both V-Carb with one strong driver.
Yeah. So how did Haas do? Let's look.
So if you look at Haas, let me go to completed. Let me go to here. So Haas did 6 and 7 each.
So Nico got you 6 points.
Yep.
Kevin Magnussen got you 7, which again I guess I would have lost that coin toss. But then
but those are all from position. So they all qualified and finished out of the top 10.
Yep.
But that's for the weekend. Yeah. So they all qualified and finished out of the top 10. Oh no, never mind. For qualifying position.
And then
you 13th 0. Oh yeah, I misread that. Okay, got it.
Then for V-Carb, Yuki got you -3. And
why did he do that? What happened there? Oh, he got lost 6 positions.
But
he passed 3 people. Okay.
Getting -3 for one of your cheaper drivers is not the worst thing that can happen to you.
No,
so
absolutely not.
Can't be too sad about that.
Nope. And then for Danny Rick, how'd he do? He again qualified. Qualified 15, finished 12.
Yeah.
Jumped up 4 positions, got 1 point for overtaking.
Not too shabby.
Not too shabby, and especially with the other team being, so that was my Limitless team. We're not going to worry about them, but when you look at like Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu, let me go to race weekend now. So Bottas got 1 point, and Jogan Yu got -2.
Yep.
So as soon as and then Logan Sargent got 0. So all those guys call it a net wash, and with both of my other Mercedes getting me like 13 and 21, it does seem that the better push right now would be to get a rocket solid, get V-Carb and get Haas for your rank and file drivers and go one strong driver.
Yeah.
Because just overall average, again, would this have been different if Russell and Hamilton had finished P1, P2? Yeah, it would have.
Oh, for sure.
But in this world, I don't see that happening with McLaren being the way they are.
With what we saw this past weekend, McLaren is something special.
Yeah.
So
here is what I really thought I had changed this team around. But you know what we're going to do? We're going to do one thing to top it all off. We are going to do some quick, I want to kind of poke around and see if I can even get this team to where I want it to be. So if we get up both of the V-Carbs, get one Haas, and where's the other Haas? Right. Nope, can't afford him. So let's get rid of Lewis Hamilton, get the next Haas. As soon as I get both Haas's and both V-Carbs in there, I cannot afford. Oh, this is why I didn't do it, because I can't afford anyone.
Gotcha.
I can't afford anybody. So as soon as
what we're looking at right now is Paul went both V-Carb drivers, both Haas, and you were trying to get whom?
I was trying to get anybody. I want to get either of the Ferraris or the McLaren drivers, or even Ferrari, McLaren, or Mercedes.
And that's with having Mercedes and McLaren.
With having Mercedes, yeah, good call. Yeah, with having Mercedes and McLaren as my constructors.
Gotcha.
Because and that brings us to another question though. Do we get Ferrari back on as a constructor? Because we can't, because they're even more expensive than Mercedes right now.
Exactly. So that's an interesting thing. Would you mix and match where you have a solid driver but not the corresponding constructor? I would maybe throw a Ferrari driver in there while still having Mercedes and McLaren as your constructors.
I would be fine with that. And
you're just never going to win big.
No,
and
I won't win big.
You're kissing goodbye the chance to just kill it with points. It's less risky. It's a diversified portfolio versus the next big tech company.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is my personal prejudices coming into this.
Yeah.
I have been burned so bad by Ferrari. Last year, the reason, and I fully appreciate this, the reason I did not win my little friends and family league.
Yeah.
Is because I didn't believe in Ferrari when they started showing improvements.
Okay.
I was like, nope, they're going to screw me over. Stayed away. Nope, going to screw me over. And by the time they came down to the last race, the guy who was in P2, I watched him start climbing the ladder.
Yeah.
He had heavy Ferrari. I had no Ferrari.
Oh, okay.
And I couldn't, it was too late for me to buy into it.
I see.
I missed that jump.
Yeah.
And I watched him come back and pass me and win the league. I ended up finishing like P4 in the Friends and Family League because my guys did so poor. I dropped down a couple places, and Ferrari guy ended up winning.
Okay.
So I fully acknowledge that I don't believe in Ferrari enough. And like right now, they're suspect in my head.
Sure.
And I don't want to get rid of Mercedes because I think they're going to do well. But could I go ahead and get a Ferrari driver on there? Yes, but I wouldn't get rid of Mercedes. So let me go with Charles Leclerc. I know everybody who's, all non-Americans are like, dude, you're butchering the beautiful name.
No, again,
but
I think it was week 1 or week 2 we were talking about this. We should call him Charlie the Clerk.
Charlie the Clerk,
yeah.
Charlie the Clerk. But now, as soon as I do this build with Leclerc, both Haas drivers, and Danny Rick, I have to get Bottas, Jogan Yu.
Okay,
so I'm in the idea behind this would be to have to divest of all the liability.
Sure.
But none of that. I can't do that. Okay. So I'm sticking with both Mercedes constructor, McLaren constructor.
Yeah.
The only thing I could do is if I were to
drop him for Piastri.
Yeah. So if I drop Lewis Hamilton, I can throw on Piastri.
Yep. And
now I have Russell and Piastri.
And that gives you $1 million left now. Can you upgrade anybody?
Let's try to upgrade Sargent.
And I'm sorry, and by anybody I mean anybody from your lower tier.
Anyone from my lower tier. Nope.
No, you still can't. So
you can't upgrade Sargent. Let me see if I can. Nope. Let me make sure it's valued.
So with that $1 million,
with that $1 million,
you can pretend to buy a seat at the next Grand Prix.
Yeah.
Holy crap, we were looking up tickets. These things are stupid expensive. They're like, oh, you can be on the T-Mobile standing room area platform for $700 to watch practice. It's like, what?
And don't get me wrong, if we get a sponsor that would give us $700, I would go and stand there. However, we don't have $700.
Any prospective sponsors, I will wear a full bodysuit of your logo. Just send me to this thing so I can actually go see one of these.
Right. That would be wonderful.
Yep.
But yeah, so I'm not clicking the trigger on that. I'm just going to go and stick with the setup I have there. And basically for my Team 3, pray that that Mercedes pulls it out. Because if not, if it ends, it could very easily end up being Ferrari.
It could be, and I think that would be enough writing on the wall for me to jump ship a little bit. I think my changes this week will consist of making room for a little more McLaren on my team.
Yes.
By dropping Hamilton, and of course that means he's going to win next week because I said it out loud. But again, I will be very interested to see how Charles Leclerc does.
But what I would advise everybody, you, me, and everyone, in light of this conversation, I know we're winding down here, is wait until FP1, like the free practices, before you make those changes.
Oh, that's a great point.
The reason being is if they do throw anybody in place of our countryman, which again I hope they don't. I hope he stays in F1. If they do replace him, though, that is something. First off, I'll have to adjust my team because I have him on one of my teams. But also, that is enough gamble if we're looking to jump ahead to reorganize teams a little bit, get rid of somebody, throw in Mick Schumacher or whoever it is, and maybe use that little delta in money. Because right now, if let's say they throw in Mick Schumacher at $5 million, I want to have enough money on my team to replace Logan Sargent with Mick Schumacher. But also, on my other teams, do I replace Danny Ricciardo with Mick Schumacher?
Interesting.
Because as soon as
he'll be cheaper.
Yeah. Because Danny Rick's at 11.2, Yuki Tsunoda's at 10.7, Hulkenberg's at 9.9, Magnussen is at 12.3.
Sure.
So as soon as somebody like Mick Schumacher, any reserve driver comes in for Williams and is at 5.5 or 6 or 7 million, you can automatically put him in place of Danny Rick or K-Mag, save $5 million. Yes, it's a huge gamble, but I'm outside of the top 1.5%, 2% anyway.
And again, in any given week, any one of those guys can still do that.
Exactly.
So
that's something to consider.
That's a great point. Yeah, look for the bargain this coming week.
Yeah, keep an eye out.
And you know, and you, I think you touched on one of the fundamentals we haven't talked about in several months, which is pay attention to practice, not for the results, but for the impact to cars and drivers. There's been enough crashes, there's been enough appendicitis that makes a massive difference in the dwindling hours before the race. So pay attention. Don't worry about placement. Worry about the nature of the cars and the health of the drivers.
And keep an eye on the social medias, because something I'm wanting us to get into now is when I am able to watch the practices like live.
Yeah.
Is as soon as something big happens, like with Logan Sargent, I was able to post that he had his crash. So hopefully I can maybe get a little bit more live update, especially if it's something huge that's like, hey, you should really shift your drivers like right now.
Oh, sure.
You know, because I don't want to take a DNF or something like that. But all right, that's all I got for this week. Do you have any parting shots?
No, that wraps it up for me. Thank you so much for sticking with us. If you haven't already, please leave us a 5-star review. That helps us out, and we love doing this. So thanks for being a part of it.
Yep. Cheers.
All right.